Hello and welcome to another agency takeover of LabTalks. I'm just going to go around the room. With me today, we've got Brandon. Brandon, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. Thanks, George. I'm Brandon Keenen. I'm the principal partner of Attention Economics and currently working with Great Big Story.
Fantastic. Yeah. Thanks, Brandon. We also have Albertine in the room with us. Albertine, do you mind doing a little intro?
Thanks, George. Hi, I'm Albertine. I'm the executive producer of Great Big Story, which we have just relaunched.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And we have a LabTalks favourite, Mr. Ben Putley. Ben, little intro.
I am Ben. I am the former host of LabTalks, coming back, and also the CEO of Alkimi Eidgensi.
Fantastic. So we've got a bit of a range of topics today, but first of all, I'm going to dive straight in and we want to talk about the importance of creative in advertising. Who wants to take a stab at that to start off with?
Well, look, I think with the new world, we're not getting ahead of ourselves, but creative is going to trump all things in the future. I mean, audiences are getting tired of the same old stuff, so creative is crucial. So getting that right, I don't think, we've seen too many bad creatives, so I think it's important that advertisers do it, take some chances, and do things that connect with audiences for sure.
Absolutely. And do you know what sort of tactics people are going to kind of go for going forward? Anything that you have a bit of a point of view for that you might want to share with the audience?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of ways when we're starting to think about differently, and I think getting into the data piece and the changing world of kind of the digital ecosystem, thinking about the creative stuff, and it is still all about connecting to consumers or connecting to future audiences. And I think there's a theory now about, one ad for all is sort of kind of making some comebacks on podcasts, right? You're starting to hear that a little bit because, and I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but wouldn't it be fun to have been a Mad Men, and live in the 60s and just sit around and drink whiskey and come up with creative ideas that people loved?
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, I think the Mad Men side of things is definitely kind of the sexy side of the things, but maybe we can leave some of the old fashions behind and bring it into the new age.
Yeah, I think so. I think the creative stuff, yeah, the old fashioned stuff is for sure, but the creative stuff, I think sometimes brands limit themselves by creating stuff very specifically using a lot of data and a lot of things and actually hyper targeting, because then they do a great job with it. So that's useful for current audiences. But if you're trying to find new audiences, right? And I think a lot of brands find themselves in a bit of a rut. If they have an over-reliance on data and an under-reliance on creative, they don't put the respect to creative that it needs. It's how are you going to appeal to new audiences that might not ever know about you? And I think you can do that with good creative.
I agree. I think I was on the train to Paris for the blockchain week, and I picked a GQ for free. I haven't had one for ages, the actual physical magazine, and you go through the first, whatever it is, 25 pages, and it's they get zero information other than, oh yeah, we circulated 1 million copies, but the amount of thought and effort that goes into the ads they have on the double page spread, single page spread, I do really appreciate, and I think there has been, with the amount of, a display ad, right? It's a 300 by 250 MPU. It's not very exciting, but on that you will get the impressions, the number of impressions that were visible. If it's a video, that 15% viewed 25% of the video, and X% viewed 50 and 75, and 100 people clicked on it. But what is that really telling you? There's a reason that whilst the investment in print and TV has declined, people still want a TV ad. People still pay tens of millions of dollars to have an ad at the Super Bowl halftime, and pay creative agencies loads of money to nail something because you have their attention. And whilst you can't necessarily draw a line to it, it's how people then perceive that brand, and that perception is probably immeasurable, but really what makes brands cool at the end of the day, I think. Blimey. About to start an electrical fire in the back of the office.
By the way, can I just back up and be clear? I do believe in data and using data to build creatives for sure. And what you're saying is 100% right, but there is a room for one ad for all and bringing that creative element back. I mean, I work with Albertine here on it's a Great Big Story. And one of the challenges I think is, creating great stories and creating things that people enjoy that are entertaining, and then working with brands and not creating an ad, creating a great story that people think are entertaining that puts the brand in that, and I think you got to wear two hats when you do that, right? So
absolutely. Yeah. I think a lot of the time what the brand is interested in and working with you is your audience, and Great Big Story has a very loyal, very engaged audience, and we want to serve them stories that fit in with everything editorial, and we want all of our Great Big Stories to have a real element of surprise, a kind of, oh, I didn't know that kind of moment. We want really engaging characters and very visual storytelling. And then I think if we can find stories that will align with brands, and that we can find a way to tell those stories, engage our audience, get them to share, get them to like, get them to really engage with the stories, but in there, carefully kind of knitted through, is the messaging from the commercial client. I think that's the sweet spot that we're looking for.
Yeah, there's actually and Charles is going to roll his eyes. I've been talking to him about this for about 12 months, but there's a website or brand rather called Vacation Inc. and they do sunscreen, they do moisturizers, they do pool stuff, like stuff you'd have on a beach, right? But they launched their site with this really cool, like designed like a computer from like the early 2000s that was just had really good playlists on it. It looked really kitsch. Like it loaded up. It had like a little kind of jingle when you loaded it. And off the back of that, they then launched this really success. I think they've just finished a round of funding for $4 million for, I mean, the sun cream's cool. It like comes in a old whipped cream bottle. And that, like they kind of just went like really just like create a vibe and like have a cool creative and then some interesting products behind it, and that actually yielded success for them as a business. So it kind of, to the point we're discussing, it is hugely important to nail the creative, because I mean the opposite end of the scale is the Coinbase ad over the Super Bowl, right? Like
the QR code,
yeah, which is just like, come on, guys. You paid a lot of money for that.
I hate that they got positive reinforcement though, because it worked, right? But that's
then the app crashed, and I'm like,
yeah.
That's really interesting though, what you bring up there, and I think we're all probably saying the same thing around about how telling a story is so important and conveying that message, and bringing back to your Mad Men, they told some brilliant stories, and that's why people were so engaged. Are there any other players or clients that you guys have been working with that you can kind of talk about that have been a really great example of what good creative is, that you might want to share with us?
So the new Great Big Story is just back since about January, February. The first videos we've been running are just recently, like April, right? So, or March.
Yeah, we launched in February.
Yeah, so we launched in February. We are working with a launch partner as from a creative end, so we're kind of going through that, and we're working out the kinks and figuring out how to come back. I mean, as Great Big Story has always had, and I've worked with hundreds of brands on Great Big Story in the past at my time over at CNN. So some of the brands, I mean, travel tourism boards were really, because to take you somewhere, I always used to talk about this wasabi video, like it was, and I didn't know this, but the wasabi that you eat at most sushi places in London is just like colored mayonnaise. It's not real wasabi. And like real wasabi is really rare and really hard to find. And so Japan Air, or maybe I'm going to screw this up, but maybe it was ANA or Japan, one of the airlines, oh God, bad plug. That's not our client anymore. Just told a story about this ancient farm guy who's been cultivating wasabi and went through the process of that. So it took me to Japan, and it took me on a journey, and it taught me something, and it made me think, that's cool. I'd love to go. So I still talk about it.
Yeah,
I've probably told this a million times because I think that to me is now I've just ruined you, because when you go out for sushi, you'll be like,
yeah,
is this real wasabi? Because real wasabi is a very different texture.
But now I get to share the story with around the dinner table, and it seems smart,
Yeah.
So thank you for that little nugget of information. I appreciate it.
like, actually, that's not wasabi. It's like, George, come on, you told us last time.
Yeah, you'll annoy all your friends. They'll be like, we're never taking George's out to Japanese. But I think brands that can do that kind of stuff really well are great. We're currently working with a brand now, and we're working out some things to with WeWork to think, how do we, they've got a story to tell, and they've got flexible working, and they're a great brand, and they, but how do they tell that without doing a TV ad? So those are things that we're working through with launch partners.
Nice.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, you mentioned video before and using that. What are the advantages of that? Are you looking at a little bit differently now with kind of short form video taking quite a prominent thing with TikTok and YouTube Shorts, those sorts of things?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when GBS stopped running under CNN, those things were not what they are now. So we've actually found huge success on TikTok and YouTube Shorts, getting lots of views, lots of shares, and seems to be kind of really engaging people and building the brand. So I guess, when we have conversations with partners about co-branded things, that will definitely be something that we will bring into the conversation and put on the table.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing. I mean, TikTok wasn't around as prevalent as it is now. Mm-hmm. And if you ignore TikTok, you're probably not doing great as a brand. I think but it's a really hard channel to do great as a brand. It's great for, merch and e-commerce or iCommerce and all those things. But so building out the TikTok piece. And I do think, and I don't know if you mentioned on the podcast or we were just talking about, but I think influencers are going to be hugely important in this creative world. And not because influencers are just like people, like talking voices. They're actually really creative people. I mean, people I think, Mr. Beast is probably the most creative person I've ever seen in my life, like the stuff he does, or some of these guys. I mean, so I think brands, I think there's a challenge working with influencers to let them create, but then there's also lots of challenges with, data, and is it all true, and do you get what you expect? Yeah. But we're trying to find that happy medium of being I think publishers need to kind of rethink their positioning. Like, publishers are not just news organizations or storytellers as much. We're also influencers. Like, Great Big Story could be an influencer, and with a TikTok and with video, and then how do we integrate that? And then also maybe leveraging influencers. But I think it's all about, they're incredibly creative people.
That's an interesting point, because I spent a brief time in influencer marketing, and you would have celebrities like the Kim Kardashians of the world that would be able to get you just a huge number of eyeballs to look at what it is that you were having them promote at that time. But they really didn't get a crazy amount of engagement versus people that maybe had like 20 to 100,000 followers, because that person probably has interacted with people that follow their content. And after a while, when you follow influencers on the platform, you kind of view them as your mate. I know what you do. That resonates with me. I do that as well. I've never really met you, but like kind of share this connection through a platform. And then it's like, if George says, "Oh, you should go to dinner at this restaurant," I'm like, "Okay, that's a good recommendation I've got from my friend. I'll try that out." And then that similar phenomenon kind of happens with these smaller groups of influencers, and they kind of are then the de facto leader by like a straw poll of how many followers they have of a particular niche or subculture that they represent. And I think that is maybe where large publications get it slightly wrong, because they are the celebrity in that analogy, and having a good creative to a particular audience is the kind of micro influencer, if you will, in that
for sure
analogy. But yes,
for sure. As long as they're not putting flowers in Pepsi cans and stopping wars.
yeah.
That didn't go so well.
No. I think that's probably what we've seen with the evolution from potentially using the word influencer to creator.
Yeah.
And as you said, Mr. Beast is probably more of the new age, where, the Kim Kardashian reference is maybe something that was 5-10 years ago that was a bit more poignant, but
Passé.
I think that's where we're moving towards. It's more creators and people being brand ambassadors, but that means around like remixing content, kind of taking that to the next level rather than just following a direction. And the Pepsi example is a great one.
Yeah, we have a producer who worked at CNN and is now coming on to this sort of second part of the Great Big Story journey with us, called Beryl. And she like, her whole thing is finding out about different foods from around the world and then trying them. And it's exactly as you were saying, people get to like come into her kitchen and see her making things and trying them. And so this week we have her trying blood pancakes, which is kind of tradition within the Sami people.
Like haggis pancakes?
Kind of like haggis, except you just replace the milk with blood.
Okay.
That's vibrant.
And at the end of the video, she's going to ask, like, this is something from a culture that maybe a lot of us would find little off-putting, but you try it and it's delicious. Is there something from your culture that you think that people might be afraid of trying, but they really should? So, we're excited to see what those comments are and bring in that kind of user engagement, and then it can potentially be a kind of creative next step for the next video.
I love that. It's like we're showing you something, teaching you something, come along the journey, and we can kind of share it together and all learn together. So that's a really nice touch.
Will you eat a blood pancake with us?
I mean, I eat black pudding. I guess that's like not too dissimilar. I think I could
figure it out. We'll bring him in.
Yeah.
Where am I going to get a pint of blood? I can figure that part out.
I'll leave that to you. You mentioned before about your launch partner, WeWork. Do you want to discuss any of the kind of successes or challenges in these campaigns and the kind of creative process you guys have been going with them a little bit more?
Yeah, so we're actually quite early days with them. So but we're really excited because they're a known brand. They've had an interesting history, and I think everyone I've ever talked to, they love going. WeWorks are cool. Like you go in there, they're kind of fit for flexible future and flexible working. So you never really hear anyone say, I don't like the WeWorks. I don't like working out there, unless sometimes they're too busy or something like that. But I think for the most part, they're cool spaces. But with everyone, there's always challenges. Like you think about, and Albertine and I were just talking about this, like just kind of creatively thinking about what is like they're in the middle of a fundamental shift in the way humans are behavior. Right. And you think about fundamental shifts in human behavior would have been, when we first got our mobile phones, that changed our lives forever. And then obviously the internet changed our lives forever. I think Web3 stuff is going to change our lives forever. I think there's no doubt that AI, I think we're extinct by 2056. Is that right? Is that the number? But I think, AI is going to change the world forever. But also, so those things you can easily say fundamentally the world changed, but also the way we work is fundamentally changed. And so that's the challenge for them. They've got this great place that is kind of designed for that future, but how do you do that without, I think everyone knows what it is. So it's just a matter of how do you connect and make sure that people are thinking, because I do believe, this is not a plug. I believe, we work better together, right? This podcast is more fun that we're sitting in a room and seeing each other's body movement and eyes. But if we did it on a Zoom call, you could do it. But we're going to create, especially in creative, if you want to create stuff, you got to be in rooms, you got to have whiteboards, and there's no denying that. But we also like to work from home once in a while.
Absolutely.
So I think, how do you have that flexibility,
there was a reason why everyone worked in offices for so many years, right? Perhaps not 5 days a week is the best, but I sadly went back to 5 days a week. I just didn't like working at home on my own because I got bored. I'd rather sit in here and just annoy people. I'm human.
But once in a while, it's nice to have a day.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, if you've got some... you end up doing more of your life admin. We're going down a bit rabbit hole. Sorry,
I can bring it back.
Yeah, it's classic me. It's out of practice. But you get a lot of stuff done that perhaps you wouldn't done. Then you are more productive because you've done the dry cleaning.
Commuting time though. You're not spending your work time doing your life admin. You're just using that commuting time.
Exactly that. So,
and as we know, creativity is draining, right? So when you've got those little bit of time back, those little pockets, that hopefully when you bring that energy, your A game to those in-person experiences, you're going to have that enough kind of rest time to, talk about some of these campaigns we're talking about, create something actually meaningful, tell a story. So, I think that's just probably about life balance, and we've definitely got that. So, I'm excited to see what you guys are going to put out there.
Yeah, no, we're excited to work with them. They're great partners, and we're really early days, but we'll share that around when we're done.
We'll be looking to the future, and also stories of people working together, and just finding those stories that have the messaging from WeWorks, but are also surprising, engaging, really kind of creative.
What's the next fundamental shift? What's the next thing that's going to I think AI is definitely the shift.
I think it'll be mixed reality stuff. I saw some ads at a basketball game where they have this crazy, hologram's probably not the right word or technically the right word, but the pitch flipped over and then these things appeared
But it's real life, but it's not, yes.
Yeah, I think it will be more like Minority Report than Ready Player One.
So if you're in a bar with 20 people, it makes it look like there's 100 people in there?
Yeah, exactly that, yeah. Or
if I owned a bar, I would just put a fake queue out front and just...
exactly that. Yeah. And then you get there and you realize you can jump the queue.
Just walk through.
We'll put a post-it.
That's really interesting.
That one, yeah.
That's interesting. I think, I don't know. Yeah. I mean, but it's just crazy to think. I mean, just in our like last maybe 20 years, how many things, or 30 years, how many things have just completely changed, and like to think, and now rapidly, like this is a total wormhole, but like rapidly, like by 2030, 2050, like I don't think any of this looks the same.
Yeah, I think there'll be, in the way that like a lot of the last round of unicorns were born from being able to carry a computer in your pocket on your phone. Like Facebook blew up because of mobile devices. Uber blew up because of mobile devices.
True.
Amazon, Twitter,
Instagram,
YouTube, Instagram, like the who's who of the last big companies. There is going to be something new. I don't know what it is.
Alkimi.
Yeah, well,
Alkimi.
potentially.
Agency.
I hope so. I don't know if we'll change the world. We'll change parts of the world. But yeah, there'll be some kind of technology that just like changes the way that everyone does something. I do not believe that it's VR headsets, just because like...
No way. I agree.
Fundamentally, when you...
Implants, maybe.
Yeah, can't see what's going on, it's more dangerous, and that is unnerving. But like, actually, you get hurt in the real world, not necessarily a metaverse. You know what I mean?
True.
So,
but we did see, and I felt, obviously it's terrible people losing their jobs, but I didn't really ever believe in the metaverse future, and I think that a lot of that thinking was whilst we were in lockdown.
Yeah.
Right. So they were projecting what's going to happen. Obviously, a lot more online usage, but as we were talking a little bit earlier, the in-person you can't beat in person. Like, I mean, some people will probably hate me and say, no, I love my virtual self better. But I think, again, back to the creativity stuff, you can't beat being in person. And we just did a creative workshop before this. If we were doing it over Zoom, we wouldn't have got the same sort of ideas or output. So
yeah, Albertine and I were just talking about this on the way over. I was in a room with 4 or 5 guys that were all investing in the metaverse. And I just said, just raise your hand, has anyone been in the metaverse? And they were investors in it, and not one of them had been in the metaverse. And I said, well, if you're investing in it, they said, well, yeah, but it's the future. I go, I don't know. I like my legs,
Yeah.
So you just wobble around, you just bobble around. You don't even have legs, right? You just kind of.
Yeah.
There's some crazy stats, which I think it is for every dollar that has been spent by a consumer in a metaverse, $60 have been invested by venture capitalists, private equity firms, investors in general in metaverses, which is like, hey.
Well, let's not poo-poo the metaverse too much.
It could be fun.
Could be fun.
It might
Ready Player
be.
One's a great film.
Hey, there's an ass for every seat.
Exactly. So we talked a little bit about, quite a lot actually, about engaging audiences, and through the kind of death of the cookie in 2024. What do we see the kind of future of that, and how are we going to be able to engage our audience going forward?
So I think that will be, think about this a lot again. It depends on the ubiquity of Web3 wallets. And so they are becoming more and more common. I think people do use them more often. There's technological advances that allow you to use a Web3 wallet to store session IDs on a computer, which is essentially what a cookie does. But I think where it will get interesting is when people find a use for it. So like,
okay, wait, sorry, I'm a little bit behind. I'm not. So let me just make sure I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Can I ask? And maybe there's people listening. They're going, what? Maybe your audience is going, yeah, we got this guy. You're saying so a secure like a secure token of some sort. My data in my Web3 wallet, like my personal data, that, and then I allow what I'm willing to share with you or advertisers. Is the data that, like you're saying, like, do you think, is that where that would be held? Like,
Yeah.
'Cause I think the future is I control my data. I should get paid for that if you're going to use it and exploit me. If you're going to exploit me and pay me for it. But also, you think, is that where it sits? So my token and my data sits in a Web3 wallet. Is that blockchain? And then like I allow certain parts of that to be shared to advertisers. Am I way off of this?
No. So like, when you go on a website right now and cookie notice comes down, you're like, I consent for you to do something I don't understand.
Essential only.
Yeah. And so the only difference will be like, you might have a wallet, or you can even call it an account that you use to browse the web. But the difference between accounts that you might have today, which are like you log into your email or Spotify, they are all siloed within that particular platform. So it's, And that a lot of the time is the USP of that particular platform. So like Spotify, it's a good example, is the USP of Spotify is not the tracks they have on their platform, because you can get them everywhere. It's the tracks that you have saved in a particular playlist. And I would have this existential fear that if Spotify ever goes under, it will be like a decade worth of my music just disappears. I won't be able to, you'll miss tracks, you know, you won't be able to remember the weird ones that you put together in a playlist at some point when you're on a flight or whatever it is. If you're able to take those preferences out of Spotify with a Web3 wallet using
that'd be super cool.
Rails, then you would, the way you use those platforms would be totally different. You would have probably use Spotify for most of the music that you listen to, just because it's got a great user experience. But there might be a high fidelity service that gives you like really good quality for when you're sat at home and you're listening to it. Or you use SoundCloud for a DJ set that you wouldn't necessarily even get on Spotify, and all that's stopping you is the user experience of moving your preferences around. So
the NFT is the new vinyl collection.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. You know, like it's actually the same thing. It's just like the value is in the eye of the beholder for that. But like, if you had a wallet that you took with you rather than leaving your data in a platform, then that is very interesting for people to know without necessarily knowing who you are. So
do you think when you land on a website, like say you come to the Great Big Story and it says, do you consent to cookies? And if it's hooked into, let's say, Alkimi or something like that, and you hit OK, then that would then connect to your pre-settings in your wallet that say, I'm connecting and I agree to these cookies, and that cookie is yours, and then they can access that because you've given them consent.
Exactly. Well, it's actually given them permission. So it's like for you to access a DApp, a decentralized app, you need a wallet. When you arrive on that web page, it asks you to sign a transaction in your wallet so it can access that information. So you explicitly have to click a button. You know what you're letting it get access to. If you then had, I don't know, some trainers that you purchased came with an NFT, and then also you had 1 Ethereum in that wallet, and then also it had stored the last 30 websites that you'd been to through a pseudo-anonymous kind of OX number. That infers quite a lot of information about what that person likes without exposing an IP address, a postcode, an email address.
And I'm also cool giving it to you. Like
And the cool thing is, it's like at the moment, aside from 10% off your first basket when you give your email to an e-commerce platform, there's no real way to transfer value back for that information that's being given by you, the individual. And so blockchain is just a thicker protocol which you can use to transfer value. So there is now, okay, I'll just give you something that has value for me taking your information, and it's like a bit more of a value exchange, which has been lost because to begin with, in the early days of the internet, like there was a lot of content online, but not compared to now. Like if the 5 of us sat around this table started watching YouTube now, we would never watch it all. So like this idea of free content in exchange for data, it doesn't pay off for the user anymore. So like that is where just blockchain in general becomes very exciting, just for re-establishing the kind of intended value exchange online, which is we are a publisher, we write content. For us to fund that content, we sell ads or audiences to advertisers, and then you have to see an ad. Where that has kind of broken down over the years, you either get a ton of ads, people taking your cookies that don't realize that data is being misused, you know, like your page loads really slowly, it produces a ton of emissions, it's like really got out of hand. So just by putting more value back into the people that are creating value in the first place is the best way to redress that imbalance that you have online now with the way that you, because if you get, I don't know, like I'm going off on one, I'll put my soapbox away in a minute, but
this never happens.
I will watch a good ad, you know, like I like TV ads because you like get one at the beginning, get one in the middle, you get one at the end. I'm like, I can deal with that. But when it's like ad here, ad here, ad here, ad here, sign up to our newsletter, it's just like a bit much. I'm like, okay, don't want to go on this website anymore. Yeah,
and those ads are designed like with your data and like specifically and your intent, and it's all intent, and you're like, it's too much.
Just leave me alone. Little and often, you know, that's the way advertising works.
I'm already trying to figure out, like, I mean, governments and regulators are already bumbling through this third-party cookie thing.
Yeah.
They're like, no more cookies. They're like, well, we need to drop a ghost cookie to make sure you can have no more cookies. Like, well, what do you mean, no cookies? Like, well, then we won't know.
Yeah.
So I can't wait to see you on Capitol Hill in America, like Mark Zuckerberg, trying to explain that to 70-year-old Congress people and be like, and they're going to be like, okay, so what you're saying is you run the internet. But I think it's really hard to explain to people, and that's going to be the hardest part, is like explaining that and making that the norm. But I think that's like definitely the future of cookies, right? Like, I think there's a way people should be, we've been getting exploited, and they take our data and everyone's making money on it. Like publishers and advertisers, and then they sell them off, and then they third party, and they retarget us until we just bludgeon us to death to buy. Like, as a user, why can't we have a piece of that?
Well, I think the stat is that you would have to pay $500 to use Facebook if there was no ads on it. People would be like, yeah, I'm all right.
$500 a year?
A month.
What if they just charge like $2 a month or something? Probably not enough, yeah.
I mean...
Well, Facebook's also made way too much money from basically stealing our data. So 500 is probably... But if they said like $1, if they got 1 billion users and they had $1 billion in revenue a month, I think there's still be more layoffs. I think there's still a lot of people that would pay $1, but I wouldn't.
No, I don't think I would either. What's interesting is, I think what Ben's just explained does feel pretty complex. What I think will be the adoption side of things is we're all quite familiar with just kind of saying accept cookies or reject or whatever. That's ingrained in our user experience already. I think with that kind of wallet connection and that signing of a contract transaction, that will probably become the new norm. And the way that you can do that is by kind of easing people to what they already know and familiar with. Yeah. So really, a lot of people don't even know what cookies are, or what we're in the advertising space, we kind of understand it, but people just say yes and no to stuff. It's like reading T's and C's. So I don't see a huge kind of backlift to it. And if you can position it in the way that it's power back to, you and kind of owning your data, that's a bit more exciting for people, but it is quite a complex subject. So Google says they're going to phasing out third-party cookies by 2023. Does anyone still believe them?
No. I think it's now 2024.
Yeah, I've heard early 2024, and there's because I think they're going to try to phase it out, but until they're like forced, because the amount of money they make off that is...
Because they pushed that back twice, right?
Yeah, I think they're going to wait until the DOJ forces them to break off little bits, and then they'll be like, hey, we just want to keep YouTube.
Albertine, why can't we just create incredible content that connects emotionally with people? That's what we want to talk about.
We can. We just have to...
It's good to know that people are thinking of new solutions for cookies that actually benefit users and advertisers and publishers. Because I've been working with a lot of publishers lately, and I was desperate to work with Great Big Story, because when we worked at CNN, it's just like one of the coolest platforms, and just the way they tell stories. And you see the comments, like when the first video came back, it was like, in this depressing world, this is the greatest news I've ever had. And like, this is so people are really happy to have it back, but
no pressure.
Yeah. But the new challenge, so a lot of the new challenge, we talked to publishers, I think anything publishers have been doing up until now in data is probably time to restart and go, okay, wait a minute. And I think all these changes are actually really good for publishers but they should have been thinking about this 5 years ago, right? So now they're going, okay, what do we do? Okay, hey, first party data is really important. So now you're going to see them all come out and be like, we need a newsletter, and we need to, capture data, and we need to do this, and we need to connect with it's like, yeah, you should have been doing that all along. Yeah. But it's interesting to see like publishers going, okay, so the data's the first party data is the gold dust, because you get consent. Then you treat your customers right, like serving them what they want and what they like, and then they're usually happy to kind of do that. And then as you go along, you can find ways to use things like clean rooms or whatever, and just say okay, and then you can share and find collaborations or work with influencers, stuff like that. So there's clever things you can do with data outside of third-party cookies. I thought third-party cookies sort of slowly took the soul out of creative. Yeah. Like, because it just moved to that. I mean, we used to think about top funnel to bottom funnel. And so you had to be really creative at top funnel, work your way down to bottom funnel. And yeah, you'd get a little more call to action intenty, but we actually there was companies that just were created, like Criteo or whatever, that just, hey, we're just going to focus on bottom funnel and just like beat the crap out of that for years. Yeah. And I think so creative, I kind of tied it back, but creative, top funnel, super duper creative, collect the data, work with your customers. And then you have an opportunity, because you've earned their trust, to then work themselves down the funnel.
I think that's a really interesting point, and I think that's what it's quite a Web3 way of thinking, that, which is actually giving value back to your community and the people that are engaged with you. So I think we've seen it work in the Web3 world. There's a lot of stuff that we do at Actually Agency, which is take some of the strategies that work well there and then integrate them into Web2 companies. But what you've just explained is a very kind of what we talk about a lot at Agency. So it's really interesting. I think the more we kind of focus on that, and ultimately what we're saying about creative is it's that actual value to people, people that's engaging, back to the storytelling we were talking about, which is where we want to be. That's what we do as humans, right? We like to share and tell stories. So, let's focus on that and maybe less on the kind of, the kind of grim back end or bottom funnel that we're talking about.
It all starts with creative, but then you need smart people to figure out the other stuff. But I really think, I'm not saying creatives aren't smart, so I don't mean that, but you've been working on some cool stories lately too. Like there's some other stuff that, the one thing is like finding great people to tell stories too, like, and people who connect with people. It's always kind of interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, we've, you totally put me on the spot there.
No Sorry, I was trying to get you involved. I talk over you a lot.
We've got some exciting ones coming up. We've just done an interview with a woman who makes all the edible props for film and TV shows.
Okay.
So in our video, she shows us how to make raw meat that's edible and vegan, and she did a lot of the props for Hannibal and some Star Trek and all of these kind of cool, creative, crazy things.
That was 3D printed meat.
No,
was that a different story?
That's a different story.
Oh, okay, sorry.
She makes it all by hand.
Vegan meat.
Finds all of these creative ways to make it so that it's really gruesome but delicious as well.
What about the 3D printed meat?
Yeah, we've also...
would you eat that?
Yeah, I'd give it a go, for sure.
Try anything once.
Yeah. Where's she based? Or where's that based, the 3D printed meat?
The 3D printed meat is in Spain, and the sort of gruesome Hollywood chef is based in Toronto.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. You got a printer?
Well, now you get into creating fake food for props for films.
I think it just sounds like you just buy a 3D printer, but
Watch the watch the video.
I'll find out.
We'll find out.
It's a plug in there. Nice. Well, look, guys, I don't want to keep you too much longer unless we've got any more to talk about. But I'd just like to thank you all individually for taking part in this, and let's maybe have another conversation in a few months' time. And we would love to hear about your progress, and we can share some more about ours as well.
Yeah, I see some things with all of us in the future, so there'll be some cool things we can do together. But
a great big story, if you will.
A great big story.
Am I right?
That's right. Not bad. I see what you did there.
Okay, so this was an agency takeover of LabTalks. Thanks for listening, and see you guys soon.
Thank you. All right.